It was a quiet Thursday morning in a comfortable home office on the second floor of a modest but well-kept house in the suburbs of Charlotte, North Carolina. The room smelled like old books and fresh coffee and had the particular organized stillness of a space where serious work gets done by someone who takes that work seriously. Behind the desk sat a man named Richard Calloway, 54 years old, the founder and director of Calloway and Associates, a mid-sized firm that had spent 20 years building a reputation not just for competent work but for the kind of workplace culture that people talked about when they described a company they were genuinely proud to be part of. Richard believed deeply that the character of a business was determined entirely by the character of the people inside it, and he had spent 2 decades hiring accordingly. On this particular morning, Richard had finished preparing an important set of documents for a prospective new hire, a woman whose application had come through a mutual professional connection and who was being considered for a senior administrative position at the firm. He had reviewed her credentials carefully and they were impressive, and he had arranged for his associate and office manager David to conduct the formal meeting at the office that morning. He sealed the documents neatly inside a white envelope, wrote David's name on the front, and then leaned back in his chair and realized with mild annoyance that he did not feel well. A headache had been building since early morning and his throat had the telltale scratchy warmth of something coming on. He considered driving the documents over himself and then thought better of it. His daughter Maya appeared in the doorway of the office at exactly the right moment. She was 23 years old and had her father's eyes and her mother's patience and a disposition toward the world that was so genuinely warm and open that strangers on the street frequently found themselves smiling back at her before they had consciously decided to do so. She had been planning to run some errands in the city that morning anyway, and when Richard explained the situation and held out the envelope, she took it without hesitation and told him to drink some tea and rest and that she would have it to David within the hour. Richard thanked her and reminded her which building and which floor, and she was out the door before he finished the sentence. The morning was crisp and bright and Maya moved through it with the unhurried ease of someone who enjoys being out in the world. She greeted the woman at the corner flower stall who always had tulips on Thursdays. She held the door of the post office open for a man with both arms full of packages who thanked her with genuine relief. She stopped at a small bakery 2 blocks from the business district and bought herself a warm pastry for breakfast because she had left the house without eating and her stomach had been making its opinion known for the past 10 minutes. She stepped back out onto the sidewalk with the paper bag warm in her hands and the envelope tucked safely under her arm and turned toward the address her father had given her. She had not walked half a block when she noticed a man sitting on the steps of a closed shop front with his back against the door and his eyes on the pavement in front of him. He was elderly and thin, and the jacket he was wearing was not adequate for the temperature, and there was nothing beside him that suggested he had anywhere to be or anyone expecting him. Maya slowed her pace and looked at him and then looked at the warm pastry bag in her hand and did not deliberate for very long at all. She walked over and crouched down to his level and told him good morning and held out the bag. The man looked up at her with the particular surprise of someone who has grown accustomed to being invisible and has stopped expecting to be seen. He took the bag with both hands and thanked her in a voice that was quiet and a little rough around the edges, and Maya told him to enjoy it and stood back up and continued on her way. Her stomach was still empty, but she felt more full than she had before she stopped. She arrived at the building a few minutes later, a clean and professional office tower in the center of the business district with a revolving glass door and a directory in the lobby. She was checking the floor number when she heard quick aggressive footsteps behind her and then felt a sharp collision as someone walked into her from the side without slowing down or looking where they were going. The envelope flew from under her arm and hit the pavement, and Maya stumbled slightly before catching herself. She turned to see who had bumped into her and found a woman in a tailored blazer and expensive heels standing on the sidewalk with an expression of pure irritation on her face. The woman's name was Natalie and she was 29 years old and had spent the better part of the morning cultivating the mood of someone who considered the rest of the world a minor inconvenience to be navigated on her way to more important things. Natalie looked at Maya without apology and told her sharply to watch where she was going. Maya opened her mouth to respond, but before she could, Natalie's eyes dropped to the envelope on the pavement and then back up to Maya, and she stepped forward and placed her heel directly on the envelope as she passed, leaving a clear and unmistakable dirty shoe print across the white surface before continuing toward the building entrance. Maya stared at the print for a moment and then looked up at the woman who was already pushing through the revolving door. Natalie paused just long enough to look back over her shoulder and tell Maya that she was getting a job in this building today and that Maya should know her place. Then she disappeared inside. Maya stood on the sidewalk for a moment. She picked up the envelope carefully and looked at the shoe print pressed into it and felt a quiet and very calm kind of clarity settle over her. She smoothed the envelope as best she could, tucked it back under her arm, and walked through the revolving door herself. The lobby was bright and busy and Maya found the elevator without difficulty and rode it up to the 4th floor where David's office was located. She had met David a handful of times over the years at company gatherings and he had always struck her as one of those people who managed to be both thoroughly professional and thoroughly decent at the same time, a combination rarer than it should be. She walked down the carpeted hallway toward his office and pushed open the door. The first thing she noticed was David standing behind his desk with a wide and welcoming smile, apparently mid-conversation. The second thing she noticed was who he was talking to. Natalie was sitting in the chair across from David's desk with her legs crossed and her jacket perfectly arranged and the easy practiced laughter of someone performing their most charming version of themselves for an important audience. She had apparently arrived just moments before Maya and had wasted no time establishing a warm and familiar rapport, mentioning casually that her boyfriend and David were old friends as if this were simply a pleasant social visit rather than a professional interview. Natalie turned when she heard the door open and the easy smile on her face collapsed instantly into something cold and disbelieving when she saw Maya standing in the doorway. She said you again with the tone of someone who cannot believe the universe has this kind of sense of humor. She told Maya that her boyfriend was the manager here and that Maya could forget about ever getting hired in this building. Her voice had recovered its confidence quickly and she seemed to have already decided that whatever Maya was doing here was irrelevant to the outcome of her morning. David however had already moved around from behind his desk and was crossing the room toward Maya with his hand extended and a warmth in his expression that made it immediately clear to everyone present that he knew exactly who she was and was genuinely pleased to see her. He welcomed her and asked how her father was doing and told her it was so good of her to bring the documents over in person. Natalie's expression shifted again. She looked between David and Maya and back again and the comfortable certainty she had been wearing since she walked in began to loosen at the edges. Maya greeted David warmly and told him her father was resting at home with a slight cold but sent his best. Then she held out the envelope. It was at this point that Natalie's eyes dropped to the envelope in Maya's hand and stayed there. The dirty shoe print was clearly visible across the white surface. The particular shape of a stiletto heel pressed into the paper in a smudge of sidewalk grime. Natalie stared at it and something in her face changed completely as the full geometry of the situation assembled itself in her mind. Maya looked at Natalie with an expression that was neither unkind nor particularly warm. It was simply clear. She told her calmly that the shoe print on the envelope was from Natalie's own heel and that the envelope contained a contract her father had personally prepared for Natalie's job application. She said it without drama and without any evident pleasure in saying it. It was simply the truth, laid out plainly in the way that truths are most effective. Natalie stood up from the chair and her composure fractured entirely. She began to apologize, quickly and in the slightly desperate way of someone who has suddenly realized that the bridge they just burned was the one they were standing on. She addressed Maya and then David and then Maya again, explaining that she had been in a hurry and had not been looking and that it was an accident and that she was not usually like this at all. David listened without interruption and without expression. Maya listened and then when Natalie had finished she told her quietly and without raising her voice that she understood and that she appreciated the apology. Then she told her she could leave. Natalie looked at her and then at David. David gave a small nod that confirmed without a single unnecessary word that the meeting was over. Natalie picked up her bag from beside the chair slowly and walked to the door and paused for a moment as if she might say something else. She did not. She pulled the door open and left and the office was quiet for a moment after she was gone. David looked at Maya and then at the envelope with the shoe print and shook his head slowly with a small sad smile. He told Maya that her father had always said the truest test of a person's character was how they treated people they believed could do nothing for them. Maya nodded and set the envelope on his desk and told him she thought that was right. David picked it up carefully and looked at the shoe print for another moment and then set it aside and told Maya to please tell her father to rest and feel better and that everything here was taken care of. Maya smiled and said she would and turned and walked back down the hallway to the elevator. On her way through the lobby she stopped at the small coffee cart near the entrance and bought herself a coffee and a sandwich because her stomach had been patient long enough. She stepped out through the revolving door into the bright morning and turned toward home thinking about a homeless man on a step with a warm pastry bag in both hands and feeling, as she often did, that the world was a great deal more orderly than it sometimes appeared to be. Kindness is never wasted even when it goes unnoticed, and cruelty has a way of leaving marks that outlast the moment in which it was committed. The way you treat a stranger on the street, the person you think cannot help you or hurt you or affect the direction of your day in any meaningful way, that is the most honest version of who you are. You never know who is watching, and more importantly it should not matter whether anyone is watching at all. Be good because it is the right way to move through the world and let everything else take care of itself. If this story resonated with you, please share it with someone who needs to hear it today. *.